One question I get often is whether or not intermittent fasting is good for someone starting out with a skinny fat physique. So I thought that since I started out with the skinny fat physique myself, and since I have been using intermittent fasting for over 4 years now, I would more or less be the perfect person to answer this question. So stay tuned, as that is exactly what I'm going to answer in this video. Okay, so let me quickly tell you my story of how intermittent fasting helped me go from being skinny fat to being more or less ripped. Before I fell in love with fitness and physique development back in 2014, I used to live very unhealthy and had no real food habits. Some days I had a little breakfast, some days I fasted without calling it fasting. But one thing was very clear: I never had much of an appetite in the morning. When I started working out with the goal to get lean and muscular, I followed the typical advice of eating from the moment I woke up and then 6 meals per day every 3 hours, because that was what the magazines and websites told me to do. In fact, if I didn't eat breakfast or have a meal every 3 hours, supposedly my metabolism would slow down and I would start saving fat and burning muscle. And at that time, it sounded so true, as I thought to myself, of course skipping breakfast or not eating every 3 hours would slow down my metabolism. The body is smart, and when it doesn't have nutrients available, it will start to save fat and burn muscles instead. So I stuck with eating breakfast and 6 tiny meals per day for a while, even though both me and my body hated that way of eating. Fortunately, at least some of the information that I used was correct, which was that I needed to be in a calorie deficit to lose body fat. So indeed, I managed to lose some fat, but only at first. It didn't take long until I started to struggle, and boy did I struggle. You see, since fat loss is all about calories in versus calories out, I started to get extremely hungry during the evenings and nights. The reason for this was that at 6 p.m. I had already used up the majority of my calories that I could eat in the day if I wanted to maintain a calorie deficit and lose body fat. The biggest reason why this sucked so much was that I went to bed at around 10 to 11 p.m. This meant that I had a puny meal of 400 calories 4 to 5 hours before going to sleep. I can remember how I couldn't sleep at all, and that some nights I said fuck it and tried to sleep anyways, just to wake up the next morning feeling like I hadn't slept at all. You know the feeling, right? When the night passes by but you question whether you actually got any sleep. Other nights, I just had to eat something even though I was supposed to be in a calorie deficit. What this then did was that it offset most of the deficit that I was supposed to have in order to lose body fat. And because of this, I just didn't care. Instead, I ate it all, which then usually turned into a total binge for a few days. And not only that, during the days, every meal felt so small that I was constantly hungry and never satisfied. It just sucked less during the days than what it did during the nights. So, as you can see, I was stuck in not getting the physique that I wanted. I felt weak, tired, and actually more out of shape. In fact, here's how I looked after a few months of dieting with 6 small meals per day. At this point, I started to realize that I had to do something else. I thought there has to be another way. And that's when I started to research for real, solid, and true information online. I started to learn that it's the total calories and macros that you eat during the day that matters, not when they are eaten. I also learned that having to eat every 3 hours is just a myth, and so is having to eat breakfast. The truth is that the body has systems in place that makes us able to fast for long times while still being able to perform well, maintain muscle, and allow us to feel good. This was when everything surrounding the diet totally changed for me. I could skip breakfast at a time when I wasn't all that hungry anyways. I could have a smaller meal at lunch and then have tons of food left in the afternoon and evenings, which then allowed me to feel extremely full and satisfied at the time when I needed it the most. I finally started to lose body fat, and within 3 months I got down to around 10 to 12% body fat. Actually, I remember how my fat dropped like it was nothing. My sleep also improved and I felt stronger and more capable again, all while getting leaner and more muscular in the process. Here's how I looked after another 3 months of dieting with 3 big intermittent fasting meals per day. The bottom line with this story is that intermittent fasting works well for most people with a big appetite and who also stores body fat easily, but who at the same time have a hard time gaining muscle. In other words, IF works very well for skinny fat individuals. But now I'm sure you're wondering, how does intermittent fasting really help with fat loss? why does it actually work? Well, first and foremost, we must remember that intermittent fasting is just a tool for fat loss. Meaning that the way IF helps you lose body fat is by making it easier to stay in a calorie deficit. In fact, as you can see in this pyramid, meal frequency and timing, basically what intermittent fasting is placed 5th in the order of importance. This means that for long-term fat loss to occur, you must first make sure you're 1, in a calorie deficit, 2, eat the correct macros, mainly protein, 3, strength train to preserve and build muscle mass, 4, eat enough micronutrients and fiber to support long-term well-being, muscle growth and fat loss. After these 4 are in place, only then is intermittent fasting effective by making the whole diet easier. So what I'm getting at here is that intermittent fasting doesn't burn fat in and of itself. It simply makes the other more important fat loss factors easier to adhere and stick to long term. Okay, cool, but why do intermittent fasting work so well for skinny fat individuals then? Well, as I discussed earlier, the biggest reason why intermittent fasting works well for skinny fat individuals is because 1, we have a big appetite, 2, we store body fat easily, and 3, we have a harder time gaining muscle. And if you want to build a lean and muscular physique starting out as skinny fat, you have 2 main tasks, which is to 1, lose body fat and 2, gain muscle mass. As a skinny fat guy, you must get both of these in place if you want to look like these guys do. But the problem is that if you can't control your appetite, then losing body fat will become extremely hard during your cutting phase. And so will staying lean when you are bulking up to build muscle as well. And this is where intermittent fasting comes into the picture. You see, by postponing your first meal 4 to 6 hours into the day, you can save up on a huge calorie budget for later in the day, where it's been shown that people are usually more hungry. In fact, what you can see here is a graph from research on circadian rhythm and hunger, where the arrow points in this scientific graph is when during our circadian rhythm that people normally are most hungry, which seems to be right around 8 p.m. in the evening. So by postponing most of your food to this time, you create a large budget of calories that's free to eat at this point. You no longer have to work against your willpower to hold back on your calorie intake to the same extent. In other words, intermittent fasting is an incredible tool for satisfying your appetite without you overeating on calories, simply because you buffer the calories for later in the day. But now I'm sure you're wondering, won't I be hungry during the morning? Well, as the research on circadian rhythm shows, hunger and appetite is at the lowest in the morning for most people. So by saving those morning and possibly lunch calories for the evening, you actually allow yourself to be more in line with your body while you're losing body fat. And I'm sure that you know what happens when you're in line with your body, right? Yes, that's right. Fat loss becomes very, very easy. But now you might say, I'm always hungry in the morning. Why is that? Can I still use intermittent fasting? Well, first of all, some people doesn't have the same circadian rhythm as the one seen in the research earlier. No, some people simply are more hungry during the morning. If this is the case for you, then intermittent fasting in the traditional sense of skipping breakfast might not be the right choice for you. With that said though, you could flip the approach and eat more in the morning and just start your fast in the early evening instead. This could, however, be troublesome for the social aspect of dieting, where you must stop eating food at a time when food is usually in focus. However, it is still a possible strategy to try if you're hungry in the morning. Now, a more likely reason why you feel hungry during the morning is simply because you're used to eating in the morning. Research has shown that the hunger hormone ghrelin is associated with habits, where more ghrelin gets released when the body is used to eat. So it actually takes somewhere between 1 to 4 weeks, depending on the individual, to get used to intermittent fasting. After this getting used to time, and especially with the help of 8 very, very specific tricks that I've written about in one of my blog posts, link to the post in the description by the way, then most individuals can take advantage of the amazing benefits of intermittent fasting. Okay, so the last thing I'm sure you're wondering by now is how you should set up your intermittent fasting schedule. Well, when I first got introduced to intermittent fasting, I started with a 16-8 schedule that was popularized by Martin Berkhan. Even though this is a fine protocol to use, I quickly realized that I wanted more freedom with my dieting. Personally, I hate restrictions and I do the most I can to avoid them. So what I wanted to improve with the 16-8 schedule was to allow for more flexibility. I did this by not setting a strict time at night where I had to stop eat, nor a strict time at midday when I had to start eat. So instead of doing this, I always make sure that I postpone my first meal of the day 4 to 6 hours, sometimes up to 8 hours depending on how I feel. And by doing this, I stop eat when I want to at night. I found that having to stop eat at say 8 or 9 p.m. just because the schedule says so is an incredibly hard thing to do in our culture today. This is because, just as I said earlier, the evening is the time when most of us enjoy food with family and friends. So allowing myself to eat as late as I want completely removes the stress of having to resist food while everyone else is eating. For me, it makes a lot more sense just skipping food for as long as I feel is possible during the morning and day instead. At this time, I'm usually on the move making things happen anyways, and I'm not thinking about food. Okay, so there you have it. Why intermittent fasting works so well for skinny fat individuals and how you should set up your intermittent fasting schedule. Now, if you want further guidance on exactly how to set up what I call the flexible fasting schedule, then check out my complete guide called Get Ripped with Intermittent Fasting. You can read the guide by going to ironbuildfitness.com/if. I hope to see you on the website. Now you have a great day. Bye.